Hello, everybody. This is Jimmy. You're reading with Jimmy. This is Jimmy's 10-minute breakdown of Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. This is an overview of all the tales in 10 minutes for 10 minutes. So I subtitled this Pilgrim's Power and the Stories That Define Us. Ready? Welcome, everybody. These are Jimmy's quick takes. 10 minutes, and what if I told you that a group of strangers on a pilgrimage ended up telling some of the most diverse, hilarious, bawdy, tragic, meaning, whatever, and profound stories ever written in the English language? When you read with Jimmy, we're reading classics. Why? Because classics are timeless. They teach us how to lead our lives, right? By looking at how other people lead theirs. This is language charged with meaning. And Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales is just that. It's a brilliant collection of tales told by a cross section of medieval society traveling together on the road to Canterbury. So, welcome to Quick Takes, where we're going to distill the greatest works in 10-minute insights. These are little 10-minute pops, so we can do a deep dive when you read along with Jimmy the actual tales. So let's take an overview of the medieval masterpiece that taught us everyone, no matter what your class, no matter your creed, your religion, or character, you've got a story worth telling. So what's the story with the Canterbury Tales? What's the setting? Well, it's England in the late 1300s, and there's a group of pilgrims that depart from the Tabard Inn in Southwark, that's in England, just outside of London, and they're on their way to the shrine of St. Thomas Becket in Canterbury. And along the journey, they make a pact that they're going to be telling stories to pass the time. There's no internet, there's no television, there's no radio. So they're going to tell some stories. So the main characters, there's many, many characters, as you'll see when you read with Jimmy. We've got a knight who's noble and chivalrous. He's experienced in battle, full of ideals. He tells a great story. There's a miller who's loud and bawdy, gets a bit tipsy when he's narrating his story. By the way, the narration is interesting because we got a pilgrim inside with the other pilgrims narrating what the other pilgrims talk about. So it's like a story inside a story inside a story. So you have to keep track of the narrators of these stories. And then there's the wife of Bath. Ho ho! Wait till you read that one with me. She's been married 5 times. She's not ashamed of it. She's outspoken, full of wisdom. It's an amazing story. And then, of course, we have the partner. He's a man of the church who sells fake relics. That's a great one about hypocrisy. So, what's the plot? Well, there's no single plot, there's no single story that you could say, well, here's the overall, except the overall underlying umbrella theme of all the Canterbury Tales, which I will analyze in a complete analysis, is probably the study of power and relationships, which all classical literature deals with. So there's many. Each pilgrim tells a tale. Sometimes they comment on it or they argue about it with others and they interrupt the tale. It's really a beautifully written by Chaucer. This is the first great, great, great writing besides Beowulf, which is also on this website. So there's an anonymous narrator who creates the collection of stories but portrays English society in its complexity. Got it? So what's the big deal about Chaucer? What is the big deal? Well, he was one of the first major writers to craft literature in Middle English. He didn't write in Latin, like Marcus Aurelius, who wrote in Greek, and even though he was Roman, and he didn't write in French. He wrote in English. But we're not going to read it in medieval English. You wouldn't like it, and it would be very hard, and we'd be spending hours and hours and hours on these words when they used to do it, because there was no consistent spelling. So we picked a translation by Theodore Morrison, which I think is one of the best. You can argue with me, Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Chaucer wasn't just writing stories, he was actually writing about people. And remember why we read? To learn how other people lead their lives. So it's a snapshot of medieval life. Nobles, peasants. It's like taking pictures or watching an old movie. If you ever watched an old movie from the 30s, If you saw a 30s, 1934, John Wayne Western, it would be very different than the Westerns of today. It's the same kind of thing with Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. It's also a study in character. These tales reveal more about the teller of the tale than sometimes about the plot, because the stories they tell reflect their character. Did you know that? That when you're talking to somebody, you're actually revealing your character? Uh-huh. So it's a playground of perspectives: comedy, tragedy, satire, romance, sex, body, bodiness, right? Like life, like life. It's just like life. And because he never really finished it, he never finished the Canterbury Tales. And there's lots of different manuscripts, and you got scholars fighting over that this manuscript is better than that manuscript, blah, 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 blah. We picked Theodore Morrison's translation. We got to start somewhere, so we started with this. And you're always welcome to look elsewhere for another translation. What are some of the themes? Power and class. Who gets to speak? If you go to work, sometimes your boss won't let you talk, right? Who gets to be believed? Do you believe everything you read in social media? The tales question traditional hierarchies, just like we do today. And it shows us the tension between nobility, the church, and the common folk. Remember, there was no television, and I would encourage you to read about medieval times in England or anywhere, pre-Renaissance and Renaissance. Storytelling. Every tale is a strategic move. Some talk to entertain, some to insult. There's just a rich variety of narrations in here. It's really excellent. There's morality, there's hypocrisy. They talk about church corruption. The church was not always good, right? If you believe and follow religions, you know, could become corrupt. There's lots of irony. For example, the partner preaches against greed, but he profits from fake relics. These people are actually admitting to the other pilgrims what they really are and what they do. The wife of Bath quotes scripture to justify her sexual independence. Did you read the Bible? I think we should read the Bible on Reading with Jimmy. What do you think? Email me, Reading with Jimmy, right? Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. Tell me if you want me to read the Bible. I think it's a great book. Gender and control. The tales don't shy away from gender politics. Who controls the marriage? Who controls money? Who controls your body? It's an amazing, amazing collection of things. So why does it still matter today? Why should we go 600 years ago and read this stuff? Well, the tales speak the truth. People haven't changed that much. You may think people have changed, but they don't. They're proud, they're flawed, they're clever, they're insecure, they're lustful, just like what's going on today. Look around you. You don't live in a bubble, do you? People are complex. We're all obsessed by identity, just like today's online influencers. Oh, I want to be an influencer, Jimmy. Do you really? What does that mean? Every pilgrim uses storytelling to present a version of themselves. It's a beautiful collection. And we live in a world of competing narratives. In other words, I'm Spartacus. No, I'm Spartacus. No, and you compete with your stories. There was no main story in here. There are as many as there were pilgrims. Just because everybody has a point of view when you do social media. Humor still disarms us. Sometimes when you see humor, really, I'm talking about real humor, not BS humor, it makes you uncomfortable sometimes because it's a reflection sometimes of what we are, right? You see yourself sometimes in what they're telling you, and it teaches us empathy. When we hear the miller and how taken advantage of he was, when we listen to the nun's priest tale, when we listen to the wife of Bath or the reeve, we hear voices that we might otherwise ignore. Remember, you read literature to understand how other people live and how you should lead your life. If you just listen to people who think like you're going to be lost. You're not going to grow. You're not going to grow. Hearing yourself talk to yourself or listening to only people with your point of view will never, ever, ever help you grow. So, calling all readers. That's the Canterbury Tales in 10 minutes. Of course, when you read the tales with me, it's going to take hours. Each tale is like almost an hour. Visit my website. That's where you are now, or you're on YouTube. Readingwithjimmy.com, www.readingwithjimmy.com. I'm on YouTube at Reading with Jimmy. And we're going to explore every tale, I promise you, in its vivid, surprising detail. We're going to start with the Knight's Tale, but there is no logic. You can read them at your will. But there is a way to read them in the order that they're presented, but you don't have to. I want to leave you with this thought. What kind of story would you tell if you were on the road with these pilgrims? What kind of story would you tell? If people come up to you and say, "Hey, what's your story?" What would you tell them? That's my quick takes. Remember, website readingwithjimmy.com. They're all here. They're in a reading list. You can pick the reading list and go through them one at a time. That QR code will bring you to my YouTube channel. There's so much to understand in these tales. I don't just read the tales. I never just read the classical literature. I analyze it, and I'm going to analyze each and every one of these tales for you to help you think about it. I don't expect you to, accept my analysis, but I'm going to give you something to think about. You can always email me, right? Reading with Jimmy, Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. I look forward to seeing you for each and every one of these tales. Thanks for coming by. That's 10 minutes. Well, I went a little long. That's okay. It was, after all, there's a lot of tales.